the labyrinth of dietary choices where the battle for optimal health rages on, Andrew Huberman emerges as a beacon of scientific truth, ready to unveil the profound impact of nutrition on the intricate symphony of our brain and body.
I basically followed the Tim Ferriss slow carb diet, which is, people can look it up, but it worked really well. It was basically some, like good animal proteins, fish and meat and things like
Why
that.
Slow carb?
Because slow carb, because it's like low
carb.
glycemic stuff is mostly lentils and beans and things and vegetables.
With unwavering resolve, Huberman ventures into the uncharted territories of the human diet, dissecting the hidden secrets that lie within our food choices and revealing the power that they hold to shape our cognitive function, our physical well-being, our overall vitality.
One day a week, you're supposed to go full cheat day. And so I would do what used to be 12 hours, but then it became 24. You start to redefine what the day is. Yeah. And that was when Costello was pretty young, and we would do it together. So I would get pizzas and croissants and donuts, and I would just do the full thing. And by the end of the day, you don't want to look at an item of food. You're just repulsed by food. The only modification I made was the next day I would fast completely, just to avoid the gastric distress of eating anything. And so I would do them on Sundays, and then Mondays I'd fast all day. And then by Tuesday, I felt pretty good again. But Sunday and Monday, or you just feel like you're sliding down the slope of just blood sugar disaster.
I think we're dealing with two general categories of people who have problems with motivation and focus. And I think we've failed to I think we failed to describe the fact that there are two groups and not one. We think, well, I need to calm myself enough to move forward. I think, and then other people say, well, no, you need to kind of ramp yourself up to move forward. Here's the way I conceptualize it based on the data that I'm aware of. Some people are just hypo-aroused. They're just not motivated enough. And those people would benefit greatly from cultivating practices like superoxygenated breathing. Mm-hmm. So this is something along the lines of like Tumo type breathing. So rapid, and we look at this in the lab, we're actually running a human study on this now. So 25 or 30 deep breaths through the nose and out through the mouth, then exhaling the breath and holding, learning how to self-generate adrenaline. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
The dopamine, you asked earlier about the arc of dopamine and how long it lasts. One of the key takeaways from that book, Dopamine Nation, that I've incorporated in my own life is that there are certain activities like cold water that create long-lasting arcs of dopamine. Those can be very useful for putting us into long-lasting motivational states. So these are not big peaks and troughs. These are the pain of the cold water followed by this long arc of dopamine. Wonderful. It's kind of an antidepressant, positive motivator, natural stimulus. I always say if you don't have access to an ice bath, cold showers, yes, will work. If you have a shower that doesn't get cold enough, keep in mind that the original studies showing this dopamine increase had people get into 60 degree water, which is not that cold, 60 degree Fahrenheit, for 45 minutes to an hour. So your water bill might go up, but you could just draw a kind of cool bath and get in that up to the neck. So, because I realize there are sometimes some cost barriers to people. Not everyone has an ice bath.
There are clinical trials showing that macro dose psilocybin, so we're talking massive dose, that puts people into a highly hallucinogenic state.
How many grams is that?
We're talking in like anywhere like 1 to 5 grams.
Dove loves mushrooms.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Ooh. They stimulate high release of serotonin, among other things, but there's work by Matthew Johnson at Johns Hopkins and work now at UCSF by Robin Carter-Harris showing that, psilocybin at the macro dose used once or twice in a therapeutic setting can really help people move through depression and trauma and maybe even eating disorders and maybe some other things too.
Wow.
It seems to create some sort of opportunity for learning new relationships between things. Like if you're somebody who's always felt like you were going to fail in life or you couldn't get over a loss or a death or a relationship, like it does allow people somehow to imagine new possibilities. In fact, 66% of people that in those trials found lasting relief, years or more, from psilocybin. Now that doesn't mean go crazy recreational psilocybin. Also, I'm just citing what Matthew Johnson, who's like one of the leaders in this field, told me. I was like, what about microdosing? And he,
I was going to ask.
And he said, he said, very little evidence. Maybe it's because the studies aren't done yet, but at least to my knowledge, very little evidence. He said macrodosing. So that was kind of surprising.
That's surprising.
I'll start with what I've doubled down on. I've doubled down on the idea, which perhaps I stated last time we spoke and perhaps not, but I certainly believe that our state of mind and body at any point in time is strongly dictated by our state of mind and body in the hours and days prior to that. And on the one hand, people are going to hear that and say, well, duh. You know, if you're sleep deprived, you're going to feel like garbage. And if you're well rested, you'll feel great. That's kind of the top contour of it. But when one looks at the neuroscience, for instance, of sleep, you start to realize that, you know, the amount of rapid eye movement sleep that you're going to get in any 90-minute bout of sleep, because your sleep is broken up into these 90-minute segments, more or less, is strongly dictated by the ratio of slow wave sleep, aka deep sleep, and rapid eye movement sleep that you had in the previous 90-minute bout. And then when you start to look at the research in terms of waking states, you start to find that your ability to be focused, say for a bout of work in the morning or the afternoon, or a creative brainstorm session, or I don't know, to maybe drill into some personal issue that you're dealing with during therapy or just on a walk or while journaling, is not a square wave function. You know, none of us should sit down and expect ourselves to just drop into that state. Much of our ability to move into that state effectively, whatever effective means, right? Whatever the target or goal of that bout, as I'm calling it, is going to be dictated by what happened in the previous moments and hours. And so when I zoom out from that, what I've doubled down on is this idea that there are just a core set of foundational things that we have to re-up every 24 hours. You know, I think thanks to the incredibly hard work of Dr. Matt Walker at Berkeley, right? The sleep diplomat on Twitter, right? It's such a great name because it's so appropriate. I mean, a decade ago or so, you know, it was like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. That was the dominant mentality out there. And yeah, sleep's great, but you know, getting stuff done is more important. I mean, Matt has really impressed on everybody that our mental health, our physical health, and our ability to perform is so strongly dependent on our ability to get quality sleep. Maybe not every night of our life. I mean, we have to be realistic, but that sleep is vital. So a hat tip is insufficient. So sleep is critical, but sleep is just one of about, I would say, 5 things that really set the buoyancy or the foundation upon which our nervous system is able to accomplish these transitions that I'm talking about at all. And those 5 things are sleep, right? In the absence of quality sleep over 2 or 3 days, you're just going to fall to pieces. In the presence of quality, sufficient sleep over 2 or 3 days, you're going to function at an amazing level. There's a gain of function and a loss of function there. Right? It's not just if you sleep poorly, you function less well. You sleep better, you function much better. So sleep, I would say, is at the top of the list. Nutrients, you know, and there you can think macronutrients. And so your carnivores are only eating meat, and your vegans are only eating plants, and your omnivores, which is, I think, probably 90% of the world, is eating a combination of those. But, you know, quality nutrients, I think that when I look at all of the nutrition literature and arguments out there, it seems that everyone can agree on one thing, which is that probably 80% or more of our nutrition should come from unprocessed or minimally processed sources. Minimally processed would require some cooking, but could survive on the shelf, as opposed to packaged foods or highly palatable foods. So you've got sleep, nutrients, but then we should also put in micronutrients. And this is where maybe we'll get into a discussion about supplementation. I think that there's supplementation or supplements is a bit of a misnomer because it implies vitamin supplements. And people say, well, can't you get all that from food? Or that whey protein, isn't that just food? Wouldn't you be better off with a chicken breast? Okay, well then when you talk about convenience and absorption, okay. But then there's this huge category of things ranging from the kind of esoterically named things like ashwagandha and shilajit and tongali and Phaedogea grastis, right? I mean, it sounds exactly all the herbal stuff, right? Yeah. You're not going to get that from food.
Yeah, totally.
So should we call them supplements at all?
I try and do a couple of things. First of all, when I was a kid, I had a little bit of a grunting tic. When I was 5 or 6, I would feel this buildup of tension in my throat, and I would do this grunting tic. If I get very tired, I start to do it still. We actually know that this is related to these basal ganglia circuits for go, no go. You've got an accelerator and a brake, basically, in your neural circuitry. And kids with Tourette's and OCD, the break doesn't work quite as well. And so one thing that happens is if I wake up in the morning and especially if I'm well rested, well, if I'm not well rested, I do a hypnosis or yoga nidra in order to recover my sleep. That works really well. But then once I'm into the process of preparing the podcast, I've already gone through my notes. I know what I want to say more or less in a kind of general contour. And then I take a walk and I try to, so no phone with me, and I try to assess whether or not my energy is too high or too low for podcasting. Mm-hmm. Because when you podcast, as you know, you have to punch out a lot of material, but then there's times when you really need to slow down and emphasize and articulate. And so what I do, I've never revealed this. What I do actually is I will recite the lyrics of songs for about 10 minutes, songs I love, while I walk out loud.
It calms you and focuses you. What does it do for you?
I think it gets my vocal cords warmed up, and it also...
Do you sing or speak them?
I often sing them, and fortunately nobody hears. Yeah, so non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, is an acronym that I coined because it encompasses a lot of practices that are not meditation per se, but that bring the brain and body into a state of relaxation and focus. So hypnosis is one variant of NSDR. There are other variants of NSDR. You can just look these up and you'll find them. And I think that they've caught on, and that the CEO of Google is an avid practitioner of NSDR, because it has this amazing ability to reset your energy levels and focus. Whereas with meditation, many people find meditation hard. And part of the reason they find it hard is that it requires focus. NSDR is a state which is very calm and relaxing. You don't have to work too hard. You're just listening to a script. Whereas most forms of meditation, not all, but most forms of meditation involve cranking up the activity in your prefrontal cortex and trying to see your thoughts as opposed to thinking your thoughts, or focus on your breath, but then third personing yourself in some respect. And that's work. And so many people who meditate quite intensely feel more exhausted. Now, that doesn't mean that meditation doesn't have any utility, but it's distinctly different than NSDR. And I think that people are working, certainly the CEO of Google, I have to imagine, is working very hard and using his forebrain. If he's going to have 20 or 30 minutes to take a break, he should, and I think this is what he's doing, he should go out for a jog and not listen to anything and just kind of let his mind wander, or sit there in a chair and just zone out, or do NSDR. The problem is people are not that good at shifting states. We are all actually pretty good at, even people with severe ADHD, we did an episode about this, can become hyper-focused on things that they actually enjoy. Because and most of the drugs designed to treat ADHD are drugs that increase the levels of dopamine. So when you like something, there's dopamine release and you can focus. It's when you don't like something that's hard to focus. Shifting states is hard. I'm sure you've experienced this if you've ever been in deep research or podcasting, and then all of a sudden you go for a run, you probably spend the first third of that run thinking. And then in the middle third, you're kind of, that thinking is fractured a bit. And then in the final third is where you finally get to relax, because the brain doesn't shift states very quickly.
Well, I think we need people in positions of power and leadership who are very good at internal control. You know, I think emotions are great. I experience them often intensely, but
congratulations.
Thank you. They're not always wonderful to experience, but I think it's clear that the level of autonomic arousal that's associated with emotions, either very high or very low, very happy or very sad, very anxious or very angry, clouds our judgment. It's very clear. And I think the sooner
we give them too much credence too. They're just feelings, man. Like, we don't have to allow them to overtake us and monopolize everything that we do.
They were designed to push us along certain behavioral paths, but they've grown in importance in the last few years. And, you know, we could get into a discussion about how, you know, social media marketing are designed to, you know, capture these very deep limbic aspects of ourselves, and they are. But what's amazing is, and important, is that everybody has a forebrain. Some people, it seems it's more developed than others, but everybody has one. And we have this capacity for what we call top-down control, which is the ability to intervene in our own feeling states and our own action states, and to set some rigor and some real clear marks that we're out to achieve. And I think it's going to start with the generation that's very plastic right now.
Yeah.
You know, most parents are afraid of stressing their kids because they don't want to, you know, again, I went to a high school where kids, literally gun high school, in the last 10 years, kids have, you know, there've been over a dozen, you know, train track suicides. So those are kids that are committing suicide for different reasons, but a lot of them is because they just feel too much pressure.